Analysis of the potential crisis in the floodwaters there. Have a live visit from a man offering safe haven for stranded New Orleans police officers, a pet rescuer rescuing dogs and cats, and another heroic American who took it upon himself to aid people stranded by Hurricane Katrina. But first up, the news from Hurricane Katrina's wake as it stands tonight. Evacuation of the last 100,000 or so residents left in the city of New Orleans continued today. Armed patrols went door to door, removing people from their homes. Now, there's some controversy tonight over whether these evacuations have been forced or not. We'll answer those questions later in the show, but there's no dispute over the condition of New Orleans right now, dangerously filthy. The Centers for Disease Control today advised people not even to touch the floodwaters in that city. That's impossible for many, of course. On the federal front, FEMA has prohibited the news media from taking pictures of dead bodies being recovered. And a Gallup poll out today shows that while 42% of Americans think President Bush did a bad job responding to the hurricane, just 13% think he's chiefly responsible for the bungled relief effort. Well, for more on what's happening in the ground in Biloxi, Mississippi, we go to NBC's Ron Mott, who's been there a long time. Thanks a lot for joining us, Ron. What's happening?
Hi there, Tucker. Good evening to you. Well, it's been 9 days since I've looked at this damage you see behind me, and at this point of the day, it sort of blends into the background, but you come back here in the morning, and it's just amazing at how much devastation Hurricane Katrina caused here in Biloxi. Now, we got some new video that was taken from City Hall, which is on the block you see behind me, and it's up the street some by about a block. That video is pointed down toward the water, which is off to my left here. We're going to show that to you now, and then I want you to listen at what 140-mile-an-hour winds sound like, and imagine yourself in your house or your building trying to survive this storm. Take a listen. Not only do you get the rip-roaring sounds of the wind, you can see what the water did here. Folks here were told to expect storm surges in the range of 18 to 20 feet. But what happened was Katrina arrived right on the heels of high tide, which is not the combination you want, a hurricane following high tide. What that meant were storm surges in the 25 to 30-foot range, and that extra 10 feet did quite a bit of damage because a lot of folks perhaps stayed here, made the decision to stay and ride out the storm, thinking that they were far enough away from the water to get away from it. But that was not the case. What was left was about 20% of Biloxi destroyed. 1 out of every 5 structures in the city gone. No idea at this point just how much money, how many hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars were lost in this storm a week ago Monday. They are beginning the cleanup process here. A long way to go. They have a long way to go. Lots behind me are not particular priorities. They are focusing on Casino Row, which is Highway 90, the center of commerce in this area. Want to get that area up and running so this community can get back on its feet again. And some of the best news that we are hearing out of Biloxi is that a lot of the power companies that supply a lot of residential power here in the area say they believe that they can get 100% or close to 100% of the electricity restored to people who can accept it by Sunday night. That was great news if it indeed happens. Tucker, back to you.
Ron, do we have any idea what the casualties are at this point, any reliable numbers or even a sense? And also, who took those amazing pictures you just put up on the screen, and is the person who took them okay?
The person who took those pictures is okay, I should say. A City Hall employee works for the city of Biloxi. Apparently, I don't know why they weren't able to get out of City Hall, but they rode out that storm in City Hall, a beautiful limestone or granite structure here in downtown Biloxi, and you can see the damage that they were out on a patio on the 2nd floor of City Hall, taking a look south there at the damage of the water coming in, the wind-whipped rain flying through the air, homes being destroyed, materials being ripped off roofs. It was quite a storm, and I'm sure at some point in the video we saw the videographers taking a break, and they were ashen-faced at what they were photographing. But now the death toll, Tucker, in terms of the death toll here in the 6th County area along the Gulf Coast, updated today to 148. That was an increase of 5. And around the state, we are nearing the 200 mark. These are confirmed deaths in the state. Right now, Mississippi, by far, with the most confirmed deaths. However, Louisiana, once that city is, and New Orleans in particular, is cleaned up, that number is expected to surge much beyond 200. Tucker.
All right. NBC's Ron Mott. Thanks for staying up for us, Ron. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Now, for what's happening on the ground in New Orleans, we go to our man on the scene there, the ever-reliable MSNBC's David Schuster. David?
Well, Tucker, the police chief of New Orleans, said today that there's still at least 1,000 people who want to be rescued and are still waiting to be picked up and evacuated. An astounding figure, and that underscores just how much the focus is still on trying to get people out alive. Apparently, some of the problems are that in many of these neighborhoods where the people want to get out and where they know that they want to get out, that the helicopters are blocked by trees and that because of debris, it's difficult getting some of the boats in. But the rescue teams continue to find and see more and more bodies in the water. They are marking, they're removing the ones that they can and marking the places where the recovery teams need to go back. And here in New Orleans, the sign of death is an upside-down triangle spray painted in fluorescent orange on the side of a house or on some debris. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has asked the media not to photograph the dead, but in many cases it has been very hard to avoid given the number of bodies and corpses that are simply floating in the water in plain sight, especially in some of the areas that have water up to the second floor of a house. Recovery teams are increasingly concerned about the decomposition of many of the bodies and say that in many cases when the bodies are recovered, they are bloated to the point that they are simply no longer recognizable. There are some new grim details tonight about where some of the bodies have been found. Apparently 100 people were killed in a New Orleans warehouse that collapsed during the storm, and another 30 people apparently died in a nursing home after the nursing home became submerged with water, and the members of that nursing home were not able to climb up to the roof to escape. The main task on the engineering side tonight in New Orleans continues to be the pumping of the water out of the city. Officials say that it's getting out of the city at the 17th Street Canal, for example, at a rate of 2,000 cubic feet per second. But to try to put it in perspective as far as what New Orleans is usually capable of, across the city there are 148 permanent pumps. The number that are working today is 23. In other words, 125 pumps that usually help pump the water out of the city following a heavy rainstorm, those pumps have now become inoperable. Given the biohazard of the standing water in half the city, city officials are increasingly concerned about the danger to residents who try to stick around. So they have said that everybody should leave. And the mayor and the police chief are threatening to evacuate people by force if necessary. So far, that has only happened in one case that we know of. Apparently, the police knocked on the door of a house where a woman was deranged. She greeted the police holding onto a revolver and a knife. They then tackled her, handcuffed her, led her away, and evacuated her forcibly. She apparently was not charged and was heard screaming, "At least let me look at my porch." Officials say it'll be several months before that woman or anybody else can look at their porch here in New Orleans. Tucker, back to you.
David Schuster in New Orleans, a man who
difficult spot himself.
Covered the heck out of this hurricane. Well, dark days for New Orleans Police Department. Katrina didn't spare the homes and families of cops. An estimated 70% of them now homeless. But 24 of them have found a home away from home with a police couple who opened their own doors to displaced police officers. Lieutenant David Benelli is commander of New Orleans Sex Crimes Unit and president of the Police Association of that city. He joins us now by phone. Lieutenant Benelli, thanks a lot for joining us. Do you know where all your officers are in the New Orleans Police Department?
Well, right now we know that the vast majority of the officers are working very hard to regain order within the city, and we're still in the rescue phase. We're still rescuing hundreds of people every day from houses that are completely surrounded by water, and the officers have been working 18 hours, 20 hours a day, trying to still save people that have been trapped since the storm passed last week.
The police superintendent, Eddie Compass, had said the other day that somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 officers, he didn't know where they were, and he thought that some of them had left town. Do we have any more clarification on that report? Is that true? What's the status?
Well, I think what we have here is because we had a breakdown in the communication system because without the electricity, we weren't able to charge our radios, and there was no phones. The cell phones went out, and so there was actually no communication. Like, I was at the Superdome. That's where the sex crimes unit and the child abuse unit and various other units were assigned to control the 25,000 refugees there. And there was members of other units that happened to get trapped there with us, and so it was hard to get communications that they were actually working. Now that we're able to restore communications, I'm sure that number is actually going to be reduced. One of the things that kind of bothered me is the fact that I think there was a picture painted that that the majority of police officers left their posts, and that's so far from the truth. Only a very few. And some of them left because of family emergencies. Some left because they were just flat-out cowards and decided to leave. But the bottom line is the vast majority of men and women in the New Orleans Police Department just did extraordinary things to maintain order during an unprecedented crisis. We had a hurricane and a flood. We had a hurricane and then the breach of the levee, which caused the city to flood. We had people trapped. We had police officers going out there and diving into this muck of just unbelievably disgusting water to save people. And in the stories, the heroic things that these officers did should have been the focus of the national media, but they chose to focus on the very few that happened to leave, and that's
well. It should just to clarify again. It was Eddie Compass, the head of your police department, who told the national media.
And I think what happens
that
he was
officers were missing, and he suggested that they, and I think this is almost a quote, that they were so frightened by the storm that they left. That's what he said.
Well, I think what happened is, again, we had a communications problem, and I really believe that what happened that you had 200 to 400 police officers that were unaccounted for, and they were actually working, but they were actually working in other units. They just couldn't get back to their district or their unit, and were working with the ones that they could, and it was hard to notify one unit that a police officer is working there.
Yeah.
But I think that number is going to be greatly reduced. But the bottom line is that we should focus on the vast majority of the officers stayed and just did unbelievable things.
Yeah, I bet that's true. I know that people we had interviewed who were at the Superdome, and particularly at the Convention Center in New Orleans, said that the police presence was really sparse, and they wanted more cops on the scene, but there just weren't enough. Do you think your force needs to be bigger than it is?
Well, I've been fighting to increase the number of police officers in New Orleans for years. As far as police officers per capita, we've always been way below the national average. But the bottom line is that you had a situation where you had the Superdome. We had 25,000 refugees. We had about 80 or 90 police officers that were there, plus 250 National Guardsmen. In a normal set of circumstances, that would have been enough.
Yes.
The problem is that right after the storm, there was a 6-foot wall of water completely surrounding the dome. The dome was lost electricity, lost water, and so the condition there was subhuman. And we were promised that that troops were on the way. 5,000 U.S. Army troops were going to be there to assist us, and they came many days later. And the fact that those officers and the few National Guardsmen that we had were able to maintain order in that subhuman condition, where there was no mass loss of life, there wasn't the rapes and the murders that was rumored to have happened, because we were there and I saw what happened, and that's a tribute to the people that were there, because Tucker, I can tell you, I was in Vietnam for a year, and the 6 days I spent at the Dome affected me and the men and women I was working with more than the year I spent in Vietnam. It was a horrible condition.
I absolutely believe that. It sounds like a frightening scene that nobody ought to have been subjected to. Lieutenant David Benelli, thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate it.
All right, Tucker.
Thanks. Still ahead, the water being pumped from New Orleans is too dangerous to touch. Gets on your skin, you could die. It's being pumped now into Lake Pontchartrain into the Gulf of Mexico. An expert on the dangers of toxic water joins me next to explain how that disaster will affect all of America. Stay tuned.